So hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on our talk on the software-defined vehicle, Unplugged. You know, SDV, software-defined vehicle, has been around for a while, but still, the software-defined vehicle seems to lack the wings to take off and fly. So we want to find out why that is, and there is change around the corner, apparently, because Bosch and Google paired together to make SDV development faster, more open, more flexible and scalable. So with me today are my two fantastic guests. We have Matthias Breunig from Bosch. He leads the Bosch Core Compute business. And we're very happy to have Dr. Wieland Holfelder from Google, Vice President, Engineering Regional CTO Google, who also heads the Google's Engineering Center in Munich. So welcome both of you.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
All right then. I really want to know why SDV has been around for so long and still it seems like this is more difficult than it actually should be. So why is that? Matthias, let me start with you.
Yeah. So I think the idea is very simple, right? You want to have flexibility to bring new features onto the device, and we all know this from the smartphone world, of course. But it takes longer because the car, in the end, is a very complex device today, right? So it's not as simple to do it. You know, there's multiple different computers or control units in the car. There's many different variations of operating systems and compute platforms and so on. So while the idea is very simple, to make it happen in reality is actually a very hard thing.
So, Wieland, I guess you agree because you're nodding. So I would like to hear your take on that. And I would also like to hear from you what you reckon is the biggest bottleneck that you would remove tomorrow if you had the option to do so.
So, well, first of all, I have a huge appreciation for the complexity. I've worked in the auto industry for 10 years before I joined Google. And so, you know, I'm not coming in and say, hey, this is as easy as the smartphone. And the smartphone, by the way, was already complex as well. But I think the advantages are so obvious and so profound that the entire industry is now heading towards SDV and trying to make it happen. And you asked about the wings. You know, I think with Android Auto OS SDV, which we have open sourced now earlier this year, we kind of plug in a layer where we say, you know, we know a thing or two about open ecosystems and platforms and things like that, which helps the industry to focus on innovation, to focus on what's really valuable for the individual OEM or the individual supplier. But then we can actually provide sort of the plumbing and the platform to make it easy. And if then there is a sensible change in the platform, because everyone agrees that we need to have this or that in addition, then everyone benefits from it. The quality goes up, the cost goes down, and that's what we all want.
Okay, so let's talk openly about open source. Let me spell it out just once. AAOS SDV is Android Automotive Operating System Software-Defined Vehicle. So this is, as you said, presenting an open source foundation for non-safety critical features. Again, what makes this more than just another platform story? So what makes it genuinely relevant for OEMs?
So up until now, we basically, for every control unit, for every little computer in the car, you had your own ecosystem, right? Your own software stack, your own protocol, your own signals. And if you then update one element in the car, you actually need to make sure that everything else is still working together. And what we try to do with Android Auto OS SDV is basically have a common layer, a common language, a common platform, so that if your windshield wiper needs to get an update, then your instrument cluster doesn't need to be touched as well, because it's still the same message, it's still the same language that they speak, and that obviously makes a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Matthias, from a Bosch perspective, where does openness really create value for you, and where does automotive still require industrial grade responsibility?
Yeah, I think it clearly needs both. So without the openness, you will never get the adoption, which really leads actually to platforms that work industry-wise, right? So I think it's a must-have. You mentioned safety also. So AOS SDV is the natural extension of Android Automotive OS, and this has been an incredible success story in the industry for the infotainment domain, right? And as Bosch, we're trying to do the same thing also for the safety critical applications with S-Core, right? So this is really kind of working on all levels of the vehicle, and it all follows the same principle to offer something which is open source, which works great to really drive the adoption. And then on top of that, I think there's still questions of how do you develop software for that? How do you test software, right? How do you also in the end, validate and certify software to your point that it's really industrial grade, that you can actually get the car on the street. So there's enough work to be left, right? But I think this unification of the operating system is really the first point in driving also down cost for OEMs, allowing reuse of software across platforms. So it's a really critical step from my perspective.
Endless integration and all
Exactly.
that. So you really save on all levels.
Well, and the other thing is you can now elevate that into the cloud, and you can actually start development in the cloud because you have this sort of standardized Android computer, we call it Cattlefish, and it runs in the cloud, and it basically behaves exactly like your ECU or your in-vehicle computers. And it's a specialized Android container, if you will, that doesn't need a screen, and it's actually behaving like your ECU. And now you start developing in that environment. And once you've written the code, you've exactly tested it there in the cloud with all the simulations that you can do there, you can just deploy it into the vehicle. And that gives you a huge speed advantage because otherwise you would need to take the actual control unit and test it there. And that is much, much more cumbersome, and you always need that physical environment.
Speed advantage, let's say from months to hours, days?
Days, I would say, yeah.
Okay. I'm too anxious, Okay. We've just been at the booth of Digital Auto, and we've seen a demo, Orca demo. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Wieland? Maybe you start.
Yeah, it was super impressive because Orca basically now tries to include in the Digital Auto platform the Android Auto SDV layer and make it work with all the other components that are already in Digital Auto in that platform. And Dirk Slamak gave us a demo and showed us exactly how he maps the signals from Android Auto SDV into other domains, and for the developer, for the user, it's very seamless, and seems to be really the right place to have it.
For me, it's very exciting to see how all the pieces now start to come together. Right? Yesterday, Marcus Hein in his keynote, he introduced the Bosch overall thinking how we frame a software-defined vehicle. Right? It's about the OS, where AOS SDV really is a core pillar. It's also about the SDV suite, which is also the services and the development platforms also Wieland talked about. And this is also where the Digital Auto and Orca work fits in. And ultimately, of course, it's about features, right? SDV features, because this is what we want to bring faster to customers with less work for OEMs to be done on the plumbing.
So in a nutshell, what is Orca? What is the proof point? I mean, it's still at the beginning, but what's the proof point in a nutshell?
Well, I think if now the first customers adopt it and actually make use of it, we have for Android Auto SDV, we have one customer that we've been working with for quite some time already, Renault. And the first vehicle that actually has Android Auto SDV in the car will be the Renault that comes out at the end of the year. And if we see more of that adoption now, because it's so much easier that it is included in Digital Auto, that would be the success measure that I would
agree. The success measure is really the proof point is adoption of more than one customer, right? Because only then the platform effects really take place. And I'm excited that we're in touch with many partners, and I think this is going to drive SDV this time for real.
Nice.
And I think that's the key, right, Matthias? Because having a partner like Bosch who has exactly all these relationships with the OEMs, is very different. We at Google cannot scale to serve, tens and more OEMs directly in a one-to-one relationship, and that's where the experience and the credibility and sort of the trust that Bosch brings to the table makes a big difference, and so that makes that partnership so great.
So the partnership actually represents the wings needed to make it fly, we can say. And by the way,
Yeah.
if you're planning to get a car at the end of the year, you might have gotten some inspiration right now. So I want also to address the elephant in the room. It's not a big room here, but there is an elephant here because skepticism remains. I mean, for sure. Platform companies want all the data, tier ones want integration, thorough integration projects. So, Wieland, why does this tension come back? How do we make people not think about the smartphone trap?
So, first of all, Android Auto OS, as it is, without SDV already, Google does not get any data. It's an open source project, and hundreds of companies actually are using it, often without us knowing about it. And there is no secret API or anything where we would get data out. And now we're going one layer deeper with SDV, but still we have zero access to that data. The OEM owns that data, and there's also there's not even this is not part of the model. It's not a data-driven business for us. It's a platform and ecosystem business, because once we have that platform effect, that ecosystem effect, then applications on top of it, and maybe hopefully some of the customers will decide to use Google Maps or Google Gemini for their assistants or the Play Store. That is where we then benefit, but with license fees, not with data. And so just technically, I don't have to argue and say, hey, trust us, we don't do bad things. It's technically not actually possible.
Okay. Well, I look into your eyes. I do believe you. Not everybody gets the pleasure of talking directly to you. So, Matthias, how justified is the fear that still remains that some platform player will quietly seize control, and how does the OEM really know they stay in control?
I think for OEMs, it's really important how they work. Is they have really a broad network of multiple tier ones they work with, multiple technology companies they work with. So the one thing they cannot have is to be locked in with one partner. And this is also why the open source angle that we talked about is so important, right? Because then you can rely to run on a platform, which is not depending on one partner, but which is part of an open source ecosystem. And then I think for selected features, for example, for integration services, for example, right? Of course, we are happy, to serve OEMs, but they will also work with other companies, right? So I think as long as we keep that balance, there's still full control. Actually, the open source adoption in the automotive industry is really broad, right? So I think this is a well-known concept by now. And with that, we're trying to bring the best of both worlds. Kind of an open source platform with AOS SDV, similar story also with S-Core, that is in the open, that doesn't lock OEMs in. And then, of course, every company will offer on top services that are adding further value.
So what do you do if this skepticism still comes back? How do you replace it with trust?
Well, I think we've just sort of mentioned all the technical arguments that there's no foundation for skepticism, and that the benefits are huge, also for the end customer, because the car will be always up to date, will always have the latest features, will be actually cheaper, it will be faster to market. So there's all these benefits, and I think if people look at it with a little bit of a sort of open mind, everyone will get it.
And I'm not sure how you see it, Wieland, but my perception is we are beyond this point.
Yeah.
So I think we had a couple of years where the OEM strategy was basically we need to do everything, we need to build our own operating system. But I don't think that's what I'm hearing today, right? So I think we're beyond the point where OEMs are becoming much more strategic in where they focus on and what do they want to do themselves, where they are also open to work with partners. So for me, it's not the conversations I have anymore.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So there has been progress, the trust is there, and there's no room for skepticism, as you said. Why does it make total sense for Bosch and Google to work together? What is it that you enjoy most?
I think for me, it's really the two no-brainer companies to work with, right? I mean, I don't need to introduce Google, and as I said before, Android Automotive has been an incredible success, and I think Bosch is also just a global powerhouse in automotive, right? We are, serving global markets, including China, basically being engaged with every OEM, but we have a clear focus being a B2B company to serve OEMs, right? So I think we bring a lot of scale and bring a lot of technical depth to also get the complex things done that are not trivial, right, in the auto industry. So for me, it's really a very obvious choice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it dovetails nicely with the experience that Google has in large platform and ecosystems like Android for smartphones. But also if you look at the open web and Chrome, we developed Chrome to actually create an open platform and ecosystem for the web, and that has worked tremendously well. We understand how to deal with billions of users, and we understand how to keep things up to date and bring the latest and greatest innovation to customers. And combining that with the strengths that Bosch brings to the table, the deep expertise in automotive, the trust that the OEMs have, is just a perfect combination.
So where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI? We hear about not just the SDV, but obviously the AI-based vehicle. How do you see the biggest opportunities for AI developer platforms in the SDV ecosystem?
I mean, for me, it's two big fields, right? On the feature side, AI is already today revolutionizing what's happening in the vehicle. You talked about speech control already, right? But for example, also for modern ADAS systems, they are at the core running on AI already today in terms of perception, path planning, and so on. And then the second area is the developer journey that you talked about, right? This will be all fully AI driven. Software for a car will not be vibe coded, but there's huge progress in, AI driven and spec driven development in the last years. So I think this will not be the same anymore in only a few months from now.
Anything to add?
Well, I think AI
super comprehensive.
Is along the entire value chain from the software development process. We've announced at Cloud Next just a couple of months ago that 75% of the software developed at Google is already AI supported and generated, 75%. And then it goes to testing and deployment, where AI again is a game changer because testing with AI can scale things up. And then goes all the way to the end user experience. And you used to remember exactly the commands to open your window, and if you didn't get it right, you never get your window open. Now you have a natural conversation. You say, it's a little stuffy in the car. Maybe we should open the window, and there it goes, right? So that's really game changing along the entire value chain.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that and how it changes my experience, maybe with my next car. So this is the model of the future, right? It's open, it's modular, it's automotive grade. OEMs stay in control, and this is where we see the future. The target picture also says, neither Google nor Bosch owns the operating system. If we look at the future, who should own what, and who should definitely not own everything? Is there a sort of governance evolving with this?
It's just like any other open source project, right? Ownership is actually not a good thing in that case. You need to have responsible people that maintain the software, and that's the ecosystem approach. And that was the point that I made earlier, we now get other OEMs adopting it, Bosch being there and being a steward of that open source component. And if there's changes to be made, then everyone can contribute. That is actually much better than having a silo and an owner and who protects that.
But to be honest, it's also a big learning journey for the automotive industry, right? And if I can say, it's also a big learning journey for Bosch, right? Because also, we will need to partner in different ways with automotive OEMs going forward. This model where you ship small boxes, with software on them, which is, secret and encrypted and so on, it's not going to work anymore. So in this new world, we also need to collaborate more openly. We will work on shared environments, right? We will, share code. So I think there's a lot to be figured out and to be reconfigured in the auto industry, and I'm very excited about this journey.
Yeah, let's set the sails. So, short question, sort of wrapping up. What do you think will surprise people most about software-defined vehicles in, let's say, 5 years, 2031? What do you say?
So for the end customer, there shouldn't be a big difference. They should just have a wonderfully working car that's always up to date with the latest and greatest features and so on and so forth, right? Because SDV itself is not something that is exposed to the user directly, but the expectation that users have of a car, that it's always up to date, that it gets the latest features, that is already there. And I think the industry has struggled a little bit to deliver on that expectation that people brought in from the consumer world. And now we close that gap, and I think that will be the big thing.
I think if we look back in 5 years from now on how cars are being developed, I think we will ask ourselves, how did this actually work? How did we do it back then with kind of all these independent and not integrated things, and how do we actually stitch this together in the end? Because I think it will not, we will live in a completely different world.
You sort of read my mind, because the final question is, and I still want you to answer it, okay? What will disappear? Or name one thing that will disappear that we all currently think is indispensable. I give you a little bit of time to think, but I think you are ready.
What will disappear? I think what will disappear is that frustration that things are not working as expected.
Okay, the frustration. What do you say? One little thing that will disappear.
looking at our projects also today, I hope that kind of these last minute software integration nightmares will disappear, where you're on the last mile you figure out that something actually doesn't work together and it's not made to work together, right, and then doesn't fit because we worked on the entire system in a very different way.
Excellent. So frustration on both sides will hopefully be a thing of the past. Thank you very much to both of you. Yeah, and all of success with the future, which starts as we speak. That was Wieland Holfelder from Google and Matthias Breunig from Bosch. And thank you, obviously, for joining us and for your attention. Until next time.
Good.